In the Clive Barker podcast, longtime fans Ryan and Jose interview guests, bring you news, and take deep dives into Barker-related stuff. In episode 462, we pull out Disc 3 of the Hellraiser Quartet of Torment by Arrow and revisit Hellraiser 3 Hell on Earth. Plus, we have some Clive Barker appearance news. This episode is sponsored by Don Bertram's Celebrate Imagination. Don Bertram is a longtime friend of Clive and advocate of his art. But Don's unique and inspiring paintings are for sale, and over 50% of the proceeds go to the Arts and Medicine program at the Texas Children's Cancer Center. There's even a paver in Washington, D.C. representing Celebrate Imagination. We're thrilled that this worthy cause is sponsoring our podcast again this year, and we hope that you'll consider looking over his Pinterest page and commissioning a painting of your own. For commissions, Don requires no money down, and there will be no obligation on your part. You can also head over to the Etsy shop to buy one of his books, like A Chimney Sweep's Tale, Celebrate Imagination, or The Imaginaries. Follow the link in the show notes, or click on the side banner, and let's see what's new with Don Bertram today. Take a look at fishies as well as tulips and sunflowers on Don Bertram's Facebook page. Also, check out his videos, going over the original painting, The Bug Brothers by Clive Barker, and his intro to the 35th anniversary screening of Hellraiser. So welcome, this is episode 462 of the Clive Barker podcast. And good morning, Jose, or I guess it's afternoon, it's after 12 now.
That's right, Ryan. Good afternoon. It's Saturday as we record this. Last night I went out and had a little bit of fun, so this morning I got to listen to some commentary track for this movie, and yesterday I'd seen all of the special extras, so I'm ready to go and fired up about Hellraiser 3, Hell on Earth.
All right. Yeah, me too. It was a little easier this time around because I think as we go along, the amount of extras gets shorter on each disc. But there's still a lot.
Viewings,
I mean, there's still a lot for Hellraiser 3. This is a lot of stuff. And so, obviously, we're going back to the Quartet of Torment, and we're on Disc 3, Hellraiser 3. And originally, Peter Atkins was going to be joining us, but he is not feeling too good. So, sorry to hear that, and I hope you feel better.
Yeah, a big hug to Pete. Maybe he'll join us for Hellraiser Bloodline Disc 4. We'll see about that.
Yeah. We do have a little bit of news from the Reef we should probably go over, right? I was excited to talk about Hellraiser 3, but we do have some news from the Reef. Clive Barker's going to be appearing at Scarefest in Lexington, Kentucky on October 18th through 20th weekend.
That's right. That convention is going to be called Scarefest Weekend. You can go to scarefestweekend.com. And another convention that Clive is doing this year. So once again, just to remind you, this is probably one of the last years that Clive is going to be doing these kind of personal appearances and conventions before he starts to focus more on his writing again to complete Abarat and Deep Hill and all those projects that he has.
I had planned to maybe go to Spooky Empire in Florida because my dad's in Florida and I haven't seen him in like 12 years. Sure. And then my dad announced that, hey, I'm coming up to Fairbanks in September, like, next week he's going to be here. So,
oh my.
Like, I haven't seen him and he's not seen Joel since he was a baby. Right. And like, since we went to Panama.
Really? Wow. That's been a while.
Yeah. And so, wow. Like, I think maybe I'm not going to go to Spooky Empire now just because, a big part of that was visiting my dad in Florida.
Of course. That makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, unfortunately, life gets in the way sometimes, and we have to prioritize what we're going to do.
Yeah.
Lexington, Kentucky, actually, that doesn't seem very far from me because I'm in Ohio.
Right.
October 18th through the 20th.
It's in the Midwest.
I should think about this one. I think this would be maybe like a 4-hour drive for me. So let's put a pin on that. But if you're in Lexington, Kentucky or whereabouts, you might end up having a cool Halloween because of the Scarefest weekend. So go check that out if you want to meet Clive. This is probably one of your last chances to do so for quite a while.
They also are going to have Simon Bamford, Nicholas Vince, Barbie Wilde, and there's some other names in here that I don't know that well. Oh, there's Billy Zane will be there.
Hey, from
cool.
Fright Night and Fright Night? Demon Night and Titanic.
Greg Nicotero.
Yep.
Yeah.
And there's going to be celeb photo ops as usual. I guess that's the thing now. It's always kind of been a thing recently for conventions.
Yeah. Adam Green, he did a show with Odorous Urungus from Guar.
Oh yeah.
Kinda cool. Oh, Bill Thornbury from Phantasm, the older brother.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So this would be cool. Yeah. I was almost born in Kentucky.
Oh really?
Yeah, my parents were driving across the country during the gas shortage and stuff, and
yeah.
in this 70s, and
we're talking
they lived in
74
Kentucky, but they were moving back to Washington. Yeah, 74. And
wow,
my dad even forced a gas station to give him gas. He's like, "Hey, I'm not moving unless you give us gas." He's like, "My wife is pregnant, and so we're just going to sit here until you let us get gas." And the guy's like, "Fine."
Wow, that's a story.
Yeah.
Wow, that must have been like a weird time.
Yeah. Yeah,
Well,
they were rationing it or only allowing locals to get gas in some places.
Yeah, well, I'm glad that your dad stuck to his plan and managed to get you guys safe and sound to Washington. Because did you guys have family there, right?
Yeah, we did.
All right.
I think
that's an interesting story.
My dad was running like a cafeteria for a tractor factory or something. And he said every day, because he had a hotel and restaurant administration degree. And so he said every day they would break the doors down at lunchtime.
Oh, my God.
Yeah. Yeah. So I don't think he was very happy with that job. He went
Give us
into
the
banking
gas
after that. Yeah.
So we're going to see some egregious misuse of gasoline in this movie.
Right. Right. Good segue. Yeah. And right off the bat, when you start up the Hellraiser 3 disc 3 on the Quartet of Torment, you get to choose between the theatrical version and the unrated extended cut. And so this time I watched the unrated extended cut, and I'm like, okay, I'm going to try to figure out what's different. Mm-hmm. And I think the only difference, and you might know the answer to this, but I think the only difference is that they put in extra scenes in the boiler room, and they're in like, VHS quality and pan and scan. Like you can see pillar bars on them.
Correct. So yeah, so those scenes, the whole movie was scanned 4K from the negative, but apparently for those extra scenes for the unrated cut, I've known some of these scenes since the early 2000s. When I went to Germany, I got this German red edition DVD of Hellraiser 3, I think.
Yeah.
And it had scenes like extra scenes in the boiler room, like you mentioned, Terry talking to, the DJ, or, more shots of people in the club. And it is a little unequal when you watch that one, because it was kind of like a flashback to Underworld, because you're watching all this crisp, grainy, super amazing, clear quality movie, and all of a sudden it's just a handful of scenes, but it's very jarring when it switches to, I can't even make out Terry's face, in this shot. But it's it's an interesting cut, and the scenes add a little bit to it. So I'm happy that there's a version like that to watch.
It's also can be misleading, and they do this on movies all the time where they, tout something as an unrated cut. And sometimes the only reason it's unrated is because they didn't bother to go to the ratings board to get a rating. It's not because there's extreme footage so that it can't get an R rating. It's really just like, this is a new version and they're not going to go try to get an R rating for it. They don't care.
Right. But I've watched the long one. I've watched the longer one. I think you did the same.
Yeah. Yeah. And one shot that I thought was kind of cool in those kind of muddy, pan and scan 4x3 scenes. One that was kind of interesting was Terry waiting in the quiet part of the boiler room, the like restaurant-y part, and JP sneaks up on her, and you see his like grinning kind of evil looking face in her coffee, or in her drink.
Yeah.
In a reflection. I thought that was, wow, that's kind of interesting. I bet that was tough to pull off.
I remember watching that when I got the red edition. I was like, oh, look at this little thing. And I think there's more stuff with JP when he's like looking at the pillar in his bedroom and stuff like that. I did watch a few details this time around that I didn't notice either. Like the really fancy restaurant that's located at the
Yeah.
Boiler Room. It looks like such a fine dining place, but then you look at the chairs that everybody's sitting, they're just wooden folding chairs.
Oh,
And I don't think
yeah.
a restaurant would ever, that fancy restaurant would have just wooden folding chairs on every table
Yeah.
for people to sit down. It's because that was the furniture factory, right? I think they made some sets at a furniture factory that I think was in Greensboro, and that's where the nightclub scenes got shot.
Yeah. Well, and it's kind of a trope in movies where you have a nightclub and there's a live band playing and people are off doing other things, and the band is just sort of in the background. And it's like, if you're at a club to see a famous band, that's probably what you're doing. You're probably not in another part of the club where they're playing violins or.
Well, yeah, I mean, it depends on if those people were just there for dinner or if they're there for the show too, because it looks like that's a different floor.
But a metal show would be so loud that you couldn't just hang around and talk to other people or go to a little fancy restaurant that's part of the same building where you can listen to violins.
The band is Armored Saint, right? The one that's playing. Yeah. Armored Saint. Are you familiar with them? I'm not that familiar with the
Not
the
too
band.
much. I know Russell talks about them a lot. Russell Charrington has a close connection to Armored Saint. We see him posting stuff about them all the time.
I think he recorded some music video or something like that.
Yeah.
That's true. The soundtrack for this movie is excellent. It moves away a lot from the symphonic stuff, and it brought in a lot more like heavy metal and rock and roll into the mix. A little bit Americanized as well, but it's Electric Love Hogs. We got Tin Machine. We've got Armored Saint. We've got Motorhead and Ozzy. The soundtrack is amazing.
But what something that Peter Atkins pointed out in his audio commentary is that, there's all these other bands listed, but really you can only hear Armored Saint in the movie. The other ones you hear for like maybe 3 seconds or a couple of seconds.
Yeah. And then there's the Randy Miller score, right? I think,
which is really kind of, if I was listening to that and I was listening for, what makes the Randy Miller score different from like Christopher Young? And I think it's really more kind of atmospheric and not as orchestral as Christopher Young's music.
I could see that.
It seemed like, I mean, they open with the Hellraiser theme, from Christopher Young. And so it's a good segue into that.
Yeah, I mean, you have to bring that back, even though I think this movie, when it was in its planning stages, from what I saw in the extras and the audio commentary that I listened to, this movie was intended originally to be quite a departure from the first two. They had some wacky ideas about this. I mean, there's one of the, for example, I think we could probably start talking about the extras. I saw that Under the Skin archival interview with Doug Bradley.
Yeah.
And in that, he mentions that there were several ideas for the movie. One of them was that this was going to be back in Egypt 5,000 years ago. And it was going to be like a pyramid is going to be the lament configuration, and it's going to summon the great pharaoh. Doug was having this conversation with Clive, and then Clive leaves, and he's like, wait a minute. What he told me is that Pinhead's not going to be in the next movie. It's just going to be like ancient Egypt and pharaohs and stuff. So I'm probably not going to be able to be in that movie. And it turns out that didn't make it, but some stuff ended up making it to The Mummy, right, with Brendan Fraser.
Yeah, right. Like the little configuration box that they had in there.
The lock for the Book of the Dead, I think, was supposed to be a puzzle. Yeah,
right. And there was also the brothel, the Pinhead as a brothel owner, sort of a plot one that we've talked about on the podcast before.
Yeah, another Peter Atkins script, which would imply that Pinhead, from the torture pillar at the end of Hellraiser 2, we see that Pinhead has been like, there's pieces of Pinhead's essence. There's like a face of Pinhead on the torture pillar, and there's like all sorts of bits. And that movie would have been putting all those bits from the torture pillar. This renegade priest called Fever would stick those into a vat, and with like some magic or whatever, he would summon back Pinhead, and he would look different. His suit would look different. And the brothel in that city where he's brought back, the architect was Le Marchand. And so the whole building worked as a lament configuration. And Le Marchand would be able to manipulate a miniature of the house, and the hallways would move and rotate, and doors would turn into walls and stuff like that. So if you can find that one out there, I do recommend you watch that. But eventually they decided to do this one.
Yeah. And one interesting thing that I hadn't known before, just listening to Pete Atkins' commentary, was that this was between him and Tony Randall, right? So Tony Randall had the idea of the torture pillar being bought by a club owner, and Pete Atkins had the idea of a person whose father who died in Vietnam, and she dreams of him, and then the dreams sort of merge with dreams of World War I, and she connects to Elliot Spencer. So they decided, they were pitching these ideas at each other, and they said, why don't we put them together into one movie?
It worked. Absolutely. Yeah, it worked.
Yeah.
I mean, this really kind of broke the Hellraiser fandom into, I think this is kind of like a British invasion, right? This is because the first two movies had been Cricklewood and Pinewood, and this one now it's in Hollywood. So,
well, sort of. It's in North Carolina.
Well, yeah. I mean, it's that old trope of using some city for another city. Like they were just shooting Superman in Cleveland, and they were making it look like Metropolis. They were putting little signs in corners that said,
I don't think it's that trope, because they don't ever say what city they're in Hellraiser 3, do they?
Well, they show establishing shots that's supposed to be from New York, right? We see the World Trade Center and all that stuff. So it is supposed to be New York.
Oh, okay. But they don't actually come out and say that.
Yeah, but they shot this in Greensboro, High Point?
Yeah.
High Point, North Carolina.
Yeah, a part of it was in Greensboro, the building at the end.
That's very interesting that you told me, because we listened to different commentary tracks for this one. You've listened to the most recent, to the 2015 one with Peter Atkins, right?
Yeah.
And I've listened to the commentary track from 2023 a few months ago with Kim
Stephen
Newman
Jones.
and Stephen Jones. And wow, Stephen Jones, I'm really very happy that he's been like very active in bringing back stuff for Hellraiser and for all these new releases that has come up, and for the Phantasmagoria volume number 9 special. It's a lot of stuff that he can bring to the table, because he was unit publicist, and he was very involved with these movies, including the fact that he cut stuff in this movie. Like he was the one who cut together the video of Kirsty's tapes at the Chenard Institute when Terry's looking through a box of tapes, and she comes across Kirsty saying that the box, it hurts, and the Cenobites.
What else?
Yeah.
I love that one, and that little scene. I kind of wish Kirsty had been in it even more, but it was nice that they put in the effort to tie it to the other movies, because we'll see after 4 that kind of falls by the wayside.
Yeah, so that was shot in the U.S., and he edited it. And Clive got paid twice. Once to get his name taken out of the movie when they were still thinking that, this movie is going to go in a different direction and blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
They were like, And
then the distributors wanted him to put his name on there so that they could get more sale.
Yeah, so he ended up getting paid twice. Once to take his name out of the movie, the other to put it back.
Yeah.
So that worked out for Clive.
And I think previously when we've talked about Hellraiser 3, we thought that Clive had directed a small part of the movie, but it kind of turns out from what I've heard that wasn't the case, and that he came in during post-production and, was there for some of the editing and stuff.
Yeah, I think there is I'm not sure how true this is, and you might have listened to that in the commentary track, but didn't Clive give some sort of input on like a scene, or like when Terry is
like the bound and hung up on the chains and stuff?
Right.
Yeah, that's what I thought too. But Pete Atkins talked about it like, that was just Anthony Hickox for that part.
Well, he did end up directing the music video, the Hellraiser music video. So Clive directed that with Doug Bradley as Pinhead, playing cards with Lemmy Kilmister from Motorhead.
Yeah.
That's a great video.
Yes.
They should have included that in this release, and they didn't. I guess
Yeah.
probably because of the music or something. I don't know. Rights.
Yeah, right. Yeah, everything costs money, but
Sure.
they were able to get all these archival. I mean, there's 3 audio commentaries on here, right? There's the one that you talked about with Stephen Jones and Kim Newman, the 2015 one that I watched with Peter Atkins, and that's on the theatrical cut. And then there's a commentary with Anthony Hickox and Doug Bradley. I think even older than the Pete Atkins one.
Yeah, I think that goes back to like 2008 or something like that. Or 2004, when the Anchor Bay set came out with Hellraiser 1, 2, and 3. I think for that one they made sure to include a bunch of stuff.
I didn't have time to watch the movie 4 times. I mean, I watched it once on the extended cut with no commentary, and this time around, and then I watched it. Then I saw it with the Pete Atkins commentary, and that's kind of all the time I had this week to get through that.
So there's a lot of stuff here that's also coming from the archives of Stephen Jones. For example, the electronic press kit, which is basically a little featurette. What did you think of that one?
I thought it was pretty cool. In my mind, when I'm trying to remember it, I'm confusing it with the FX dailies, which is completely different. Yeah, but it seemed like kind of an extended trailer, from what I remember, right?
Yeah, it's like an extended trailer, and then there's a little bit with an interview with Clive in a room. He's sitting.
Yes. Oh, that's right. Yep.
Movie. Yeah, he's talking about the movie. He's talking about, well, in the first one we saw Pinhead and being summoned from hell, and the second one we found out a little bit more about the man that he used to be, and now in this one, the creature of Pinhead is unbound on Earth, and that's he's all excited talking about that, and it's kind of a small room. You see that he's sitting in front of the you can see a little bit of the torture pillar behind him, and then it goes to other interviews, like for an interview with Doug Bradley. And this was all stuff that Stephen Jones came up with the idea to make electronic press kits, and that really helped, because you remember back in the day when we used to have TV channels that late at night they would play like shows about what movies are coming out, and they would have like extended previews and stuff like that.
Yeah.
We don't seem to have that kind of show anymore on TV, where you can get, they would just play a featurette and stuff like that, interviews with the directors and actors.
I guess they just save all that stuff for the discs, and even now discs are becoming mainly just for collectors. And people are just watching movies on whatever shows up on Netflix, or I don't know. It seems like the audience is changing.
I do have a question. Like I don't really use the iTunes that much, but when you buy a movie on iTunes, is there an option to also get special extras or something, if there are any, or is it just the movie?
Yeah, there is, but I don't really buy that many of them on iTunes. Most of what I've bought have been really old movies that don't have any special features.
There's an image gallery as well. That has a lot of interesting shots behind the scenes. You will see like Clive with Anthony Hickox. You'll see Terry and Anthony Hickox with Pinhead, like at the church scene where there was like an altar, and a lot of interesting behind the scenes shots in that image gallery.
Yeah, and the FX dailies, I had a little trouble focusing because the sound was off, and it was just a bunch of shots of showing how the special effects were working, like the chain coming out of Pinhead's mouth and, stuff like that.
Right. Multiple takes of that stuff, and takes of them figuring out how to do that girl that JP brings to his apartment, and then Pinhead kind of eats her. Getting the chains to like hook right to the clothes and do the right ripping and all that stuff. So interesting. This has never been seen before, and it comes from the archives of Stephen Jones. So Stephen, this guy is killing it. He's bringing so much good stuff about Hellraiser back into the mainstream, so us fans can get to see this, and it's so rewarding.
Did you watch Time with Terry archival interview with Paula Marshall?
Yeah, I saw everything. Great interview.
And I was surprised to find out that she hated smoking, and she wasn't a smoker, and she had to do that for this movie. Yeah, and that's always something that kind of bugs me, because I don't like smoking is kind of annoying to me too, and like seeing every character always, even like Ken Carpenter's cameraman guy getting out as soon as he gets out of bed, he has to light a cigarette before he even can sit up.
That's realistic, though. I know people like that. People who would smoke like 3 packs a day, and eventually they have to have a triple bypass, but that's a different story.
Yeah, I've known people like that, but they're not alive anymore.
There's a lot of smoking, even in the extra features, the older extra features, like the Doug archival featurette. He's smoking. He lights up while he's talking.
Yeah,
and then there's an
Pete
interview.
Atkins sent us a picture of him on Facebook. He's saying, "Hey, good luck. Sorry I can't be there." And he said, "Be sure to talk about the porta potties." And he's standing outside by the torture pillar like he's waiting to use the porta potty, and he's smoking in that picture.
Great.
Yeah.
Yep. Oh yeah.
I'm glad most of these people have quit, by now.
Well, Tony Hickox, he was, from what I understand, and this is from, I think, the commentary track with Stephen Jones and Kim Newman, but he says that Tony Hickox had an issue with like the smoking bans that were starting to appear in England and America. And so he made sure that every character in the movie smokes. And funny thing that I found out, there's actually prop cigarettes for movies that people can smoke.
So they don't have to endanger their health.
Yeah, they don't have actual tobacco in them, so they just have like some harmless like dry herb in there, and they can just smoke it and puff it out. And it looks like tobacco smoke, but it's not tobacco. It's just a harmless kind of herb. Maybe they were smoking those.
At least. And I don't miss the time when people used to smoke in their houses and then their walls turn all yellow and stuff.
Oh my God, you're giving me flashbacks to my undergrad times. Yeah. I once lived in a room that the guy who used to live there smoked like a chimney. Yeah. And one day a cleaning lady came in and she started using a broom with a bleach covered towel on it. Yeah. And then I found out that the walls really were supposed to be much whiter than that. And it was kind of gross.
Yeah.
Like, how could you live inside this room and just be surrounded by smoke,
Yeah, it seemed like sometime after that, people really stopped smoking indoors for the most part.
So Time with Terry, she also goes on to mention one time she was hanging out at some party and John Cusack was there. Yeah. And John Cusack kind of turns at her and says, do I know you? Do we work together? And she's like, no, I'd remember if I'd worked with you. And then he came like, Hellraiser 3, right? And she's like, yeah. And she's like, what are you doing watching Hellraiser 3, John Cusack? Yeah. And he's like, well, he apparently had gone into like a video store and rented the movie, but apparently they gave him the wrong tape. And so he ended up watching it. And he said, you were really good. And so there's that, which is interesting. John Cusack, Hellraiser fan.
And she dyed her hair black for that movie because she has brown hair.
Right. She had it dyed jet black. And she goes on to talk about how it made her look so different. So but she had a good time. She had a good time. I like the way she talked about Doug Bradley, that he looked like a seasoned pro because this was his 3rd movie. And that he was like, hi, darling. He was just sitting there smoking and whatever. Yeah. And that he was very friendly. And she had a good time. I'm glad she came back. I mean, I guess it was her first movie, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
She had been a model, I think. Yeah.
That's right. It was a model. Yeah. And I'm thinking of the other actress had been in one other movie, I think.
Oh yeah.
Prior to
Cherry. Yeah. What's her name?
Cherry Farrell. She was she went on to be in Star Trek Deep Space Nine.
Yeah. She became the symbiotic host and alien, right? There's like
yes, exactly. Yeah.
She's 2 aliens in one.
Right. Yeah. There's like a little slug that lives inside of them that is, that carries the memories of the previous hosts with it.
Yeah. Raising Hell on Earth was an archival interview with director Anthony Hickox, which I also saw. It was also the same time as they did that Under the Skin with Doug Bradley.
And the Time with Terry, yeah.
Yeah. And Anthony Hickox goes on to talk a lot about how the movie came together, and it's a really good interview. So sorry that we've lost Anthony Hickox some time ago. Unfortunately, he passed away. We posted about it, but dedicated to the memory of Anthony Hickox.
Did you? I even watched the theatrical trailer, and I was a little shocked to see that some of the stuff they put in the trailer, like that sex scene with with JP and that woman in the. Like, wow, you put that right in the trailer?
Yeah, it's a trailer shot. You got to put
Yeah.
the stuff that's like the sexy stuff, the explosions, all that
Yeah,
cool
I
stuff goes
guess.
in the trailer. Yeah.
Yeah.
It was the 90s. This movie is kind of an action movie at times.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's not as subdued and like atmospheric as the first two. So Time with Terry was really cool. I'm glad she came back for that. Raising Hell on
Yeah.
Earth was that director Anthony Hickok's interview.
I thought it was also interesting that they picked actors. One of them was playing, one of them, the actor's name was Terry, but it was the other person who was playing a character named Terry. I just think that must have gotten a little confusing on the set.
Oh, sure. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I love the new transfer. It's really good, with the exception of those little bits of VHS footage. They edited this movie originally in, you can see that in the credits, Idea Flex or whatever. And it was basically a VCR bank where you would have like 20 takes of the same scene, and then you'd be like picking up which parts you want to put. You would have to go into a computer and select the cuts that you want to put in the sequence that you wanted. And then you'd start hearing the VCRs clunking in and recording, and then another would stop, another would clunk in with another shot. And that's how they were going to edit the movie. And apparently that was created by one of the producers. It was owned by one of the producers. And they were like,
Yeah, because he owned, was it Larry Mortoff or Kuppin? I can't remember which.
I think it was Mortoff, right? Lawrence Mortoff. They keep calling him Larry. In Pete Atkins'
commentary, he said that they gave up on that and they switched back to editing on film.
Right. So that's what Tony also says in the thing
which I didn't know, because I thought the movie was edited in VHS, all the way before. This.
But then he says
yesterday.
But then he said that I had no idea how we were going to shoot that. So at some point we just went back to film. But I was bringing that up because I guess some of these alternate takes that are put back into the movie, that explains why they're like VHS quality. I guess they didn't have, those were trims or other scenes that they cut, and then they couldn't find the negatives to scan them in 4K. So they had to just use the material VHS that they had. Yeah, the VHS
I am
footage.
So glad the movie wasn't edited in VHS.
Yeah.
I mean, can you imagine how hard it would be to watch now with the blowing it up to, 4K or whatever to watch on your TV? Well, and at a personal level, that's kind of how I'm feeling about having electronic copies of movies that you buy from a service, right? Yeah. Even if you buy it from Apple, from iTunes, and you download it, it's still not a guarantee that you're going to own that in 10 years. And
that's right.
And especially when it's something from Hulu or Netflix or whatever, like, you have to keep on subscribing if you ever want to watch the Hellraiser movie again. I mean, I don't care for that at all. I mean, I really want to be able to buy the movie. And I'm hoping when their viewership drops on that movie that they'll put it out on a disc for us to buy.
I agree with you. Yeah. I mean, it's really hard to be able to, buy something on streaming and then all of a sudden it gets taken from you because, this is leaving Netflix on such and such date.
Yeah.
I mean, Netflix, you don't really buy stuff on it, but for example, Amazon, there's been books that have been removed from Kindle and people have bought those books and all of a sudden they're not there anymore.
Yeah. And they do the same thing with movies. I mean, not as often, but it happens.
So you end up not paying to own something, but paying for the privilege of having access to it. And then that access can be revoked. You got charged for something and now you don't have it anymore. And, and you agree to it in the streaming platforms terms of user agreement. They put that stuff in there like, this is not in perpetuity, blah, blah, blah. This is just to get access to the particular content and we can revoke access at any time. It's probably there. So that's why having discs is so important, right?
Yeah. And in fact, a lot of movies I own 2 copies now because, as I buy them in 4K, I've been putting the Blu-ray downstairs in the Airbnb. So I've got a whole shelf full of movies down there for that people can watch.
Oh, that's great. That's really nice of you to do that. I remember when I went into a cabin when I went to Hockin Hills National Park. The cabin had a bunch of DVDs. One of them was like The Color from Outer Space with Nicolas Cage. So we ended up watching that one. Yeah, inside the cabin at night. It was nice. It's always fun when the people leave behind, and I'm guessing a lot of people will leave DVDs at the Airbnb that they take with them, and they just end up getting added to the pile.
Not so far, no. We have
No?
people leave food.
Yeah.
They'll leave food all the time.
Hey, I left you a bunch of
at our
Vienna
Airbnb,
sausage cans and a ham.
So in our group, when we went to Texas Frightmare weekend, somebody bought like a case of beer or something that we just left for them and said, "You guys can have this."
Oh yeah, I remember that. Yeah, we went to Costco with Joe Manco.
Yeah.
It was a lot of fun to revisit the movie. This is definitely one of the more fun experiences that I've had. Every time I had a chance to see this movie, I would go ahead and watch it, whether it's on TV, whether it's on a festival. I mean, I've seen this one on the theater a couple of times, maybe 2 or 3 times.
I saw it once in its original run. And then that was one of the few movies that I bought on VHS instead of Laserdisc when it came out to buy. And then I used the tearaway coupon thingies on there to get the Art of Horror.
Oh yeah, the videotape. Yeah, about Clive Barker. Good stuff.
Yeah. I still have that. I don't have the VHS copy of Hellraiser 3 anymore, but I still have that VHS of the Art of Horror that I sent away for.
This is some of the best dialogue that Pete Atkins ever wrote for Pinhead. It's really good stuff. The monologues that he goes on when he's trying to seduce J.P. Monroe or
Paula Marshall. Plays Terry. Yeah.
The Cenobites are a little goofy, but they became pretty iconic, I believe.
It's an interesting point that Pete Atkins says, hey, the reason they can be goofy is because they're pseudo Cenobites. They're not real ones that were created in hell. These were sort of ad hoc put together on Earth by Pinhead. And that's an interesting point of view. And I you think about that, but the box did kind of suck them up and send them back to hell at the end. So they should be still in hell down there. Maybe they're getting upgraded. Like, hey, this is not up to our standards. We're gonna upgrade you guys to real Cenobites. But I always wished that they would make a Hellraiser movie that had all these old other Cenobites, from the first 4 movies.
Yeah, like they would pick up CD Cenobite and say, okay, let's take these CDs off, dude. Let's put some circular saws in here instead.
Yeah, exactly.
Upgrade you a little bit.
Yeah.
Handmade.
Well, and a CD would shatter if you threw it at somebody. But
sure.
But I guess it's like a tornado can send a pencil through a tree. And so maybe it's something like that. I don't know.
If he throws it really hard.
Yeah, exactly. And then there's that scene you had mentioned about, you had talked about gasoline, and I always think about that where she says like, oh shit, gasoline. And it's like, that's narrative, right? That's to tell us that, no, this isn't just the alcohol.
Yeah.
How is it going to blow up a car with,
because we're not there. We can't smell it. So they have to convey that to the audience. And it's, but it's just, I just love the awkward pose that they do. So CD and Camerahead are coming down the street chasing Terry, right? So at one point, Rick the barman, or I should say Barbie the Cenobite, who is played by Peter Atkins.
Except voiced by Anthony Hickox.
Oh, is it?
Yeah, he said because Pete couldn't be there for ADR, so Anthony Hickox did the voice when he's like talking about the rose or whatever.
Okay. Oh, I didn't notice that. I'll have to go back. But Barbie the Cenobite with his magic gasoline shaker, he just throws it on to the barricade of the police, and the splashes everywhere, and the cops are like, shit, gasoline, and then they just stay there like holding their arms up, like looking around like, oh no, whatever should I do? And Barbie blows out the fire, and boom, controlled explosions. They did that in an actual street. They blew up those 2 cars.
Wow. Yeah.
It's crazy.
And one thing that got mentioned in the commentary is that there was an Elm Street cafe, and that Terry passes by when she's running, and that was just really there on the street. That was not anything that they planned, but they focused on it so people could see an Elm Street cafe. But there was another business called Larry's, and that was for Larry Mortoff, I think, the producer.
Yeah. Going back to how this got started, I think that Hellraiser 2 had been done. I think in the meantime, between the 2 and 3, Film Futures, which was created by, I think, Chris Figg and another partner, that had kind of folded. And then the Roger Corman company, New World Pictures, had also folded. So New World had owned the rights to Hellraiser, and then New World had folded. And so they were like, who owns the rights? Apparently, Larry Cuppen, he was a film entrepreneur and an investor. And then he was involved with film production, television production for many years. Then there was a kind of a fire sale of like rights. And I think him and a few partners, they bought stuff like Children of the Corn and Hellraiser. It says here his other partners were Harry Sloan and Larry A. Thompson. Along with Larry Cuppen, they purchased Roger Corman's independent production company, New World Pictures, in 1983. Thompson eventually left the company a year later, and Cuppen and Sloan, as both executives of the New World Pictures, they were able to branch the company into 3 new divisions. New World International handled the motion pictures done outside the United States. New World Television handled TV shows and made for TV pictures. And New World Video, that was video distribution for all their products. Yeah, so that's how he got the rights to that. So that's
he
why
he must have sold the movie rights to Weinstein's, right? And then, but he hung on to like the television rights.
That's right.
Yeah.
I have a book here actually called Indie, like the story of like Dimension or something like that. So I need to go into that book, and if I find out more, I'll probably bring this up on the next episode, and I'll see if I can find out more about how Harvey and Bob ended up controlling Hellraiser.
Yeah, right. And they made life really difficult for Hellraiser Bloodline.
That's right. Yeah, there was a lot of problems with that production, which we will get to in time. One other thing I'd like to bring up is, thanks to the 4K, I've noticed some details, and another fan also noticed some cool stuff. Kyle Hart, one of my friends, he's working on a camera head mask with Ed Martinez. He was messaging me the other day, and he told me that he noticed that there were elements of the Hellraiser box on Camera Head's camera appliance. Oh. Yeah, he showed me some pictures he took from screenshots he took of the 4K, and you can see little brass bits of the box decorating the mechanical pieces of the camera. So it's like we had Leviathan tech before the Hulu Hellraiser.
Right. Yeah. That's cool. Yeah, stuff we never would have noticed when it was, VHS quality.
And listening to the Stephen Jones and Kim Newman commentary, there's a part in the boiler room scene where the guy from Gremlins, Zach Galligan, is actually there. It's in a cameo.
Oh yeah, right. Does he get stabbed with the spear?
Yes, he gets stabbed and impaled with the pool cue. Yep, that's him. He only shows up for like 2 seconds.
Right.
But apparently he was a big Clive Barker fan, and Stephen Jones remembers that Tony Hickox, who had worked with Zach, he was having coffee with Clive, and he invited Zach to come over. And I think Stephen Jones was there too. And he's like, and Zach just started talking to Clive, and he completely ignored us because he was just such a big nerd. And he was a big fan of Clive Barker stuff.
Pete Atkins in his commentary talked about how much money they saved by hiring production people in the cast. He said they had like 20, 30 people that were extras or smaller parts that were not actors. They were crew and stuff.
Like Lawrence Martov, a producer, he plays the derelict in the opening scene.
Right. And of course, the writer, Pete Atkins, being the Barbie Cenobite and the barman.
The priest at the church, demons aren't real, they're metaphors. He was the casting director, apparently.
Yeah.
There's a lot of like little interesting things, like I think in the operating room scene where the body of the kid, his head explodes. I think
the nurse, right?
Yeah, I think she's also from the production, and of course all the extras in the boiler room, they were just people from locals who they put out this flyer. Stephen mentions they put out a flyer with the Hellraiser picture, and they were like, hey, you want to be part of our movie? Just show up with your coolest outfit you can, like leather and chains and whatever.
Yeah.
So they got this huge line of people show up all dressed up, and they're the guys you see in the nightclub. which is a little weird because there's parts in the nightclub that you see people wearing suits and tuxedos, but then you see people wearing leather trench coats. And then I swear to God, there's some guy with a mustache just standing in the middle of the club wearing a red T-shirt and shorts. And I'm like, he would never have got into this club dressed like that.
Yeah. But if it's a club that's playing metal music, you'd think that their clientele would just be people going to it like it's a concert.
Yeah, yeah. Except the concert is at a furniture factory.
Yeah.
And that shot at the end with that monument in the building. So
yeah,
apparently Bob Weinstein gave Tony Hickox, after he saw the early cut of the movie, he was like, well, I like the movie. What if I give you an extra week of shooting? What would you add to the movie? And he's like, well, I would add more scenes in the club. I would add more kill shots in the boiler room. I would add like a different ending. I was like, okay, well, you got it. So they shot some more stuff after the wrap party.
Shots. Yeah.
Yeah. Which was, according to Tony Hickox, you never shoot the day after the wrap party. You just don't. Because people are going to be tired. They're going to be sleepy. So he woke up, freaked out, thought he was already late for the shoot that day, but they had changed it to noon. So he was driving around the city looking for the production, looking to see where there was going to be a crew outside in the street with some trucks or something. And he was thinking, oh, man, I'm late. I'm going to get fired. And then he saw that sculpture, that big brass sculpture with a disc and the cube in the middle that appears in the end.
Yeah.
And he saw that and he was like, oh, that's cool. I should put that in the movie. So that's why he ended up putting that building and that monument at the end of the movie, because it just fits, right?
So I wonder then if it wasn't planned that she would put the box into the concrete.
Well, for sure, I know that shot with the monument at the building came just when he was driving around the city. So I don't know if she was supposed to just stick it there in the concrete and it would be over. But they added that a little bit at the end to show the influence of the box, right? Working its way into the building and the foundations.
And that's really the connecting thing between Hellraiser 3 and 4 is that building. Yeah.
They left a little crumb so they could go and pick that up for the next one.
Yeah. It was a lot of fun diving into Hellraiser 3 again through this Quartet of Torment, and I'm looking forward to the Disc 4. We already did the audio commentary for the Bloodline workprint, so we don't have to go over that one too much, but, there's plenty of other stuff that we'll be able to cover.
Of course, and hopefully Pete will join us, and we will hear a little bit more about that production of Bloodline.
Yeah, on his commentary, he was kind of chatting with a producer from the company that was doing the audio commentary special features stuff. Yeah, I think for Arrow. And he had said, we should do one for Bloodline. He goes, the problem with, I'd love to, but I like chatting with you. But the problem with doing that is I have to hold my tongue on so much stuff.
That is true. Uh-huh.
Yeah. That was back in 2015. I mean, nowadays, the stuff that everybody knows about Weinstein is quite a bit different.
I mean, there's always a lot of power dynamics in movies, especially with trouble productions like Bloodline, that are just never fun for anybody to revisit, unfortunately. But the episode with the Hellraiser Bloodline workprint commentary was episode 436, in case you want to go back and watch that and listen to it. And we also had some things here, episode 39. We had Jonathan Q, Max Lichter from Pyramid Gallery, and Mark Buckle on the other side of the world to talk about Hellraiser 3 Hell on Earth. So that's episode 39 and 40.
It's 39 and 40?
Yeah, we divided it into two parts because it was so long.
This wasn't the commentary then. This was just discussion of Hellraiser 3.
Yeah, this is a discussion of Hellraiser 3. And apparently we got into 4 as well. Didn't we do a commentary track for the first Bloodline workprint? I'm not sure.
I don't think so. I don't know, actually. I'm not sure.
This is the Hellraiser that has the coolest Cenobite ever, which is Barbie, played by Peter Atkins.
Yeah.
I just love the design that they used for Barbie with the barbed wire wrapped around the face and the whole outfit, and the fact that he can blow fire out of his mouth, right? I mean, we've never seen any Cenobite have other powers other than just summoning chains and stuff like that. So
Oh, I have one more thing I wanted to mention about the Peter Atkins commentary. This was something that I just recently mentioned on Facebook, but I was watching it, preparing for this episode. And at the end, Pete Atkins talks about the Clive Barker podcast.
Hey.
And he was talking about how he had a conversation with Rob Ridenauer, and then Rob gave Hellraiser 3 a 6 out of 10 for a review. And he's like, "Hey, what'd you do that for?" And Rob told him, "Hey, you can just tell me to shut up, or whatever."
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Here it is. Episode 367, Classic Commentaries, Hellraiser 3, Hell on Earth.
Yeah. 367.
That was back from October of 2016. Oh my God. That was 8 years ago. 8 years ago.
Yeah. So, and the reason it's a higher number is because I went back and gave those commentaries numbers and put them into the timeline. But
this was supposed to be the last movie of the trilogy, right? They were supposed to be like, hey, this is it, Cricklewood, Pinewood, Hollywood, and finally Pinhead is defeated and sent back to hell, and the box is buried in concrete, never to be seen again. But then that was not the end. There's
the teaser of the building and stuff. So
yeah.
I mean, he was sent back to hell in the first movie too,
but it makes you wonder, like, oh, the box is in concrete now. Who's going to find it now? They're going to get to it. At the time, this was supposed to be like the end, and then they did the fourth one, and then they said that was supposed to be the end. And Kim Newman and Stephen Jones joke about that because they start talking about, you remember when we went to the movies to watch the final chapter of Friday the 13th? Right. Then the next year we were watching another movie from Friday the 13th.
Yeah. Well,
it's like these movies never
don't
end.
Agree that any of these movies were supposed to be the end. I mean, I think that they purposely leave them open for sequels every time. Even after Hellraiser 2, Pinhead was dead, reverted him back to human, and then cut his throat. And it's like, even after that, he's still alive.
And the fourth one, well, let's be honest. Between the fourth and the fifth, there was quite a hiatus. So for a while, that was the last Hellraiser, even though...
No, it's only like 3 years.
Was it?
Yeah, 1996 to 99, I think.
I thought it was a bigger hiatus on that. That's interesting. But the fourth one was supposed to be the end too, but then it's like, no, they just kept on doing them.
I don't think it was supposed to be the end. I mean, it's a huge loophole to, kill Pinhead in like 300 years in the future.
Yeah, that's true. You could always go back,
yeah.
And then Clive decided to kill Pinhead in the Scarlet Gospels, and just won't stay dead. Hellraiser will not die.
Yeah. The sequels, the 5 through 9, that was pretty rough.
They were a bit rough.
Yeah, it's tough. It's tough as a Hellraiser fan to see people just saying, well, what can we shoehorn Hellraiser into? You just take any script and you put a Pinhead and a puzzle box in it, and now it's a Hellraiser movie.
Yeah, I mean, they're fine. Those movies are fine. They kept Hellraiser alive. People got paid. People were working. But they do have some nuggets in them. I mean, there's really good stuff on Hellseeker with Kirsty. There's interesting ideas, at least in Deader.
Well, Inferno and the Wire twins in Inferno even, and that's one of the worst, but.
Yeah, I was going to say Inferno and Hellworld are two that I don't really particularly care to go back to, but then you had Judgment, which was good, and then we had the Hulu one, which was exciting.
Judgment has some interesting stuff in it, but the budget
as an angel
is still, but the budget was
atrocious,
terrible. Yeah,
it is pretty atrocious. But Paul T. Taylor did a great job, dude.
Yeah. Well, so I was watching. So when the box, the little tube comes up and sucks up all the Cenobites, and that was a new thing that hadn't been done before, But I was watching, and because it was sucking up all the other Cenobites, and it looked like it was sucking up Pinhead. But then suddenly he gets into her mind. He goes into her mind and has this battle with Terry in her mind. And like, well, wait a minute, did he get sucked into the box or not?
He resists, right? Because the other ones, the energy hits them and they get turned into energy and sucked into the box. But when the box hits Pinhead, he kind of resists, right? He's like, and then I think he does that because he's trying to sneak his way into her mind so he can go through the window of her mind. And then he would be here forever. I'm not sure, but that's what I took out of it.
And another question I had, and I'm trying to remember if this is the case, but was his on the torture pillar, the blue version, that JP Monroe buys in the beginning, wasn't Pinhead's face by the floor and upside down?
That's an interesting question.
Because like the blood that he flings on there when he gets bitten by the rat goes down and it goes into Pinhead's mouth, I thought.
I think there's two faces, right?
Yeah.
I think there's actually two faces on the pillar. Looking at images of the pillar, it does look like it is made to look like almost like a playing card. So Pinhead is standing up with his arms like crossed over his chest, touching his shoulders. Yeah. And then it goes down to his waist, but then his waist starts becoming reversed and there's another part of his body with another head on the bottom.
Oh, okay.
At least the one I'm looking at has that.
Yeah, and it's not the focus, so it's it was kind of subtle, but I was looking at it and like, well, wait a minute, how is his face down at the bottom, upside down? But then he's talking to everybody. His face is at like, normal height for a person standing in there.
Right, it's a different face, but it's down there. Yep, that's also the same face that eats that girl. Then the blood kind of pulls around the face and gets sucked in. And
well, mystery solved, I guess.
Yeah. And this was supposed to be the original torture pillar from the end of Hellraiser 2, which would have evolved in the years. I imagine like by taking energy from the people around it, maybe.
That's a good question, because it is it's a cool design, but it's a completely different design from the one at the end of Hellraiser 2.
Right. So I think this was like Hell's way of hiding and waiting. It's like he's cocooned. And one thing that is in the commentary track with Stephen Jones is that he brings how this is very much like Dracula, like the Dracula Hammer movies, like that scene with the blood being reversed and sucking back into the mouth. Apparently comes from Hammer Dracula. That's an inspiration from one of those scenes. Yeah.
And Pete Atkins had said that he was inspired. There was a movie. I wish I could remember which one it was now, but he said that there was a movie where some girl was like knocking on the door and they wouldn't let her in. And then, then there was like a trickle of blood under the door. And so all of that was that inspired the nightclub scene of the bottom of the door and hearing the chains and stuff.
Oh, it's great. That's a great moment. And there's no music at all. So you're just kind of focusing on that. And
and you just hear,
yeah. And you see that blood coming out. I recently saw a movie that did the same thing in a very, very effective way. Maxine. I saw that movie. There's a scene where there's like blood coming out of a door, and it just reminded me so much of Hellraiser.
Is that an A24 movie?
Yeah, it's an A24 movie. It's in theaters now, I think. Yeah.
I haven't seen any of that's like a trilogy, I think. I haven't seen any of those.
Oh yeah, it's pretty good. I've seen it's a trilogy made up by a movie called X, one called Pearl, and this one Maxine. But Pearl is kind of a prequel, and if you see the first one X, you can go straight into Maxine because it just takes place a few years after the end of X. Pearl is just going back to another character's story from the first movie, and
is it trying to? It seems like it's similar to Texas Chainsaw Massacre or something, right? Where it's like people making a porno movie in this place where they shouldn't be. And
X is that, yeah. They rent a farm out in the middle of nowhere, and then just weird stuff starts happening.
Yeah.
I don't want to spoil it for anyone because it's a really good trilogy. If you have a chance, check it out. At least if you've seen X, you could probably go straight into Maxine. But Pearl is worth watching too.
Well, we want to give a shout out to our Patreon members. Of course, the best way to support this podcast is through our Patreon at patreon.com/BarkerCast589. Our subscribers will get exclusive access to content not available anywhere else, like our Collector's Corner video series, rare Barker videos, and early behind-the-scenes stuff. Plus, backers in the $10 tier will also be able to choose an episode topic, and we might mail you something once in a while, depending on your location. Our supporters also get access to the exclusive channel in our Discord server, We'll be forever grateful if you consider helping us out and subscribing to our Patreon. So what's new on Patreon? Thank you very much, David Anderson, Eric Vandeholt, Daniel Elvin, and our newest Patreon subscriber, Amanda Stewart. And, of course, to our returning sponsor, Don Bertram, Celebrate
Imagination.
Yeah. So currently on our Patreon, Jose just wrote a nice article that kind of describes the origins of the podcast and what we were doing creatively before we ever started this podcast. Jose had like a Hellraiser blog and where we met on forums and stuff. It was pretty cool. And you put
up a new article as well, right?
Yeah. I think it was new last week. I just did a quick article about being able to recover our show notes. Yeah. From the season 1 through 3 that were missing. That was the most recent one that I did. And then the Jericho Collector's Corner, which I'd like to get back to Collector's Corners. It's just that sometimes I end up spending a lot of time editing an episode and then the weekend is gone.
Yeah, that's the problem. We will also, I just recently got the Rawhead Rex 4K Blu-ray. It arrived in the mail yesterday. So I just opened it up. I haven't gone through what's in there, but it looks like it's pretty standard. The same stuff that was in the other Blu-ray that came out, not the 4K, but the 1080p or whatever.
We talked about as news, but I don't think we ever reviewed that one either. So now we can just, now we can watch this one and talk about it.
Me dinner's on the table.
Yeah. Because of your goddamn stupidity, my son is dead.
Yes. There's so many quotes from that movie. It's just so quotable.
Yeah.
All right. We'll have more Jericho Squad coming up. We'll have a review of that 4K Rawhead Rex Blu-ray. We'll do some more Boom Hellraiser Bestiary comics discussion. So this is 6 issues.
Yeah, we're almost there. I think we should split those into 2 parts, like 3 issues per episode.
And this is also, if I recall that, it was a lot of short stories, right?
I think so, but I can't remember, but it might tie together some of the loose ends of the stuff.
Let's split that 3-3 and make it a 2-parter, and we'll go through those issues. I recall I had a good time with those because they were little stories and they were pretty satisfying to read.
Yeah, so that'll be fun. All right, and this podcast, having no beginning, will have no end. Thank you for joining us, and we hope you have subscribed. You can find the Clive Barker Podcast wherever you find audio. Show notes for this episode, as well as news and reviews, can be found at our website at www.clivebarkercast.com. The Clive Barker Podcast, or BarkerCast, is an independent editorial podcast and blog that is not affiliated with or under contract by Clive Barker or Seraphim Inc. This is a labor of love by the fans for the fans. You can chat with us on our Facebook BarkerCast Listeners Group, our Facebook page, Twitter, or our Discord server. The best way to support us is to buy our book, The BarkerCast Interviews, Occupy Midian, available in hardcover on Amazon and ebook on Amazon and Apple Books. Fundraiser 10 is all about Patreon this year. Become a patron to get access to exclusive stuff, pick an episode topic, and maybe even get cool stuff in the mail. You can also buy a t-shirt on our TeePublic store. Go to teepublic.com and search for BarkerCast. Leave a message for us using the SpeakPipe link on our blog. Opening and ending music generously provided by Ray Norrish.
Thanks for listening.